Scripture this morning comes from Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 to 9. We've been walking through the middle part of Matthew for our sermons throughout this series, and we're going to pick up with that today. It's a familiar parable. Listen to these words. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the lake. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into the boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." Well, if you've heard any of the sermons from these past 3 weeks, you know that I've been saying a lot. I've shared a lot of food for thought, and so what better scripture than one that's talking about nourishment and grain? This food for thought, I hope, is also food for faith. I hope it's food for thought and for faith for the future of this congregation, for your congregation wherever you are at, and for the denomination at large. You know, speaking specifically about the E-Town congregation and about our online community, it's incredible to see the impact that we have had. This is an engine of faith that changes people's lives. This message of peace, service, and openness to all is rock solid. It is theologically relevant. It is inspiring. It is spirit-led. And it's critical that the world hear it. It's also our call. So, as I mentioned before, today for the sermon, the pastors who are here, part of E-Town Church of the Brethren, and Pastor Eric from Lidditz, they're all going to share some feedback, some thoughts. We're going to have an exchange of ideas. And as always, we'll have the talk back later because I'm not sure we'll be able to get it all out during this short sermon time. Just to recap, part of what I've shared has been encouragement to look at things with a different perspective. And so now we're going to have many more perspectives, thinking about what it looks like to move from a stability mindset to a growth mindset, to think about community that is more than just localized here in E-Town geographically, to reimagine a leadership structure for the congregation that would reduce bureaucracy and empower nimble decision-making, to honor what Desmond Tutu calls the complementarity of all people and gifts, to encourage not only pastors and church leaders who are excellent caregivers, but also pastors and leaders who are witness-driven, who are visionaries, who are boat rockers. Those who name the gorilla in the middle of the ball game, if you were watching last week. Those who make new Oreo flavors that keep driving everyone back to the original. To act with a sense of urgency. Pastors, I really look forward to your thoughts and ideas today. Thank you.
This is an exciting time in the life of our congregation, in the life of the world, really. These are times that we never expected. These are times that certainly took us by surprise in knowing how to respond, and here we are, but we're together. You know, before I begin, I'm aware that this is a long winter, and there are many people experiencing depression and sadness because of the isolation that we continue to have. So remember that we are here, remember that you have one another, and we'll get through this. But if you need to talk, if it would be helpful to kind of process this whole thing with somebody, feel free to be in touch with us because these are difficult times for all of us. Well, as we think of transitions, the leadership team has asked me to share something before I begin talking a little bit more about other things in ministry. Many people have been inquiring. When Greg announced his resignation, they wondered if that meant that I was resigning as well. And I just want to give a little bit of clarity there. I'll be making a video this week. The leadership team has asked me to make a video to post and tell a little bit more about that. But there have been some questions, and we want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. You know, for me, pastoring is a second career. It's one that I chose very carefully and intentionally midlife. I attended seminary and graduated after, it took me 13 years because I was working and had children that we were busy with. So I was ordained in 2004, the year that I turned 50. Getting started at midlife, I decided that serving perhaps 20 years would be my goal. If I'm still healthy, if my ministry is effective, and I still feel that call by God as I hear it with others as well. So now I'm into the 17th year. I have nearly 3 to go in my 20-year plan, and so now I have 3 years to go. You know, we think this 3-year plan will work well with our staffing plans here. We need to identify the needs, our staffing needs. We need to search for candidates or a candidate, provide for transition and onboarding. So along with leadership team, we want to assure you that we've got this and that we will be moving ahead. And retirement is probably about 3 years away for me. Just a little clarity there. You know, I am part of the boomer generation, like many of you, and I love Bob Dylan. I mean, I grew up on that. Many of you did too. And I think about the song, The Times They Are A-Changing. And I think this is a theme song maybe that we've had for some time, actually. Even pre-COVID, we have seen that the ways of doing church and being church are changing. For some time now, we know that what worked really well for our generation as we were kids growing up in the church and also as we had our children growing up in the church, things are different now. Life has changed. The times they are a-changing. Young families are busy, really busy, and life can be overwhelming. You know, I see it in my own kids and my own grandchildren. It's a way of life. This is life today. I know about young mothers are busy. I know that young mothers have shared that they sometimes will drop their children, this pre-COVID, drop their children off at Sunday school and go and sit in the car for some quiet, just to have some quiet time. Parents have dropped off their children and then gone for coffee because they haven't had a chance all week to sit and to talk. Very little family time. I think COVID's been good for that because it's really caused us to be at home with our families more, but it is getting really long, and we need new paradigms. We needed them before COVID time, and now we know that we need to do church differently. You know, some people are really enjoying this live streaming. There's a lot of flexibility in it. You can stay in your jammies with a cup of coffee, or you can watch it later. Statistics tell us that some folks will never return to in-person church. Up to half of a congregation, perhaps, is what I've read. So we have lots of questions, lots of opportunity, and we ask things like, how do we meet the needs of a growing online congregation? This is new turf. What are our new paradigms moving ahead? What will ministry look like as life returns to a very busy world? These are all exciting possibilities that we want to continue to work on and work with you on these things. And another thing that I wanted to just mention here is our building project. You know, we had been kind of gung-ho, and it's really stalled with the pandemic, of course. Still some work behind the scenes, but we haven't been able to be together to talk about this. You know, I know it's been a frustration. 20-something iterations is a lot. It's been a lot of meetings. And Greg, I know you've gone to many, many meetings on our behalf, and along with the building committee have put in much time to the building plan that we have currently. And that is much appreciated. You know, building and anything with facility, especially of this magnitude, is a very important move, one that people are taking seriously. The fact that it's taken a long time is a good sign, bad sign. It's taking a long time, and that's very difficult, but also people take it very seriously, and people are eager to make the right decisions. I think now it's time to trust those who lead. We need to move ahead. Our congregation is a precious treasure, and we have been growing. Before the pandemic, we were growing and including many new people and young families. And now we've got a whole online congregation that we are just delighted to walk with. And if we want to continue, we need this facility from which we can do ministry. To care for this building responsibly is expressing hope for the future. On a personal note, I've shared this with you all before in church council meetings. It's important to me that my grandchildren have such a congregation as this, where they can learn what it means to be a follower of Jesus, to practice peace, service, and openness to all. I love it that Emmy comes into the sanctuary and he can't wait to run up here and find delight in running down the accessibility ramp in the chancel area. He finds joy in being here and being part of this congregation. Our New York grandson, Shavi, can't wait to come. He can't wait to come to Pennsylvania and to come to church and to play with Red Dog. I think you guys have a picture of Red Dog here. That Red Dog is one precious Red Dog, and he talks about it a lot. But it's a symbol that this is the church of the future. These are our children, and we want to nurture them in the very best ways. You know, our latest building proposal looks to be practical. It's forward-looking, and most importantly, it's clean and safe for those who enter here. You can go on the website and you can look at all the information that we have there on the building project. We have a good team of financial folks who will help to guide us. I'm really excited to see what's ahead, what we can do and what we can be as both a local and a global congregation. I think God will continue to have great things in store, and I am glad to be on this journey with you.
Well, I'd like to first begin by acknowledging the amazing ministry that Greg has provided throughout the church through the last 15 years of ministry. 15 years. And a little bit of ECOB trivia, not everyone knows, is that Greg and I, as well as our bell director, Ron Bellamy, were actually hired all at the same time and all had the official same start date. So it is hard to believe that was 15 years ago. A lot of time together, a lot of stories, a lot of ups and downs. But thank you, Greg, for amazing ministry. And I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that this is a bittersweet time of very understandable mixed emotions for many of us. We celebrate together a massively impactful pastorate. But the fact that you'll no longer be pastoring us, it brings with us confusing feelings, confusing mix of sadness, maybe even some anger, confusion, fear, yet also gratitude, and even excitement. Excitement for your future, Greg, and for the future of this church. Change is difficult, yet all throughout the Bible, God is continually calling us to not run away from, but run towards change, towards transformation and towards renewal. In Deuteronomy 31:6, a translation states, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of that which lies before us, for it is the Lord God who goes with us." God will not leave or forsake us. There have been some great conversations here these last couple weeks. We see a lot of bravery and a lot of courage to both say the things that we've heard, to hear them, and most of all, to decide what we do with them. And I've expressed in talkback times before that one of my biggest fears is that we have this great energy, and we see just in the talkback, and we see how excited folks are, about change, about renewal. And my biggest fear is that these will all just go down as remember those great sermons, and we won't take that next step. It's time for us to be brave and courageous. In this sermon series, Pastor Greg has asked us to take ownership as followers of Christ and leaders in the church. Are we fully living into being the body of Christ that is peace, service, and openness to all? Are we prioritizing coming together as a community, seeing our diversity of ideas, experiences, backgrounds, and gifts as a strength, rather than to be torn apart by our differences and immobilized to move forward? Are we acting as the brave, courageous, and transformation-embracing people that Christ calls us to be? Or do we too often resort to what we know and to what is comfortable? Finally, are we seeing those values which we hold at our core as a continuous source of fundamental renewal, or as rigid traditions that form prison walls around us that prevent us from fully living into all that God has in store for us? Friends, change is upon us whether we like it or not. It is a significant event in any congregation when leadership changes. But now is our time to be brave and to be courageous. It's that time for transformation and renewal. It's our time to take ownership, to see past our differences and lead into a future so that we can make this new chapter an exciting new beginning rather than the beginning of the end of our story. Let's explore how we can not only find excellent leadership for the church, but to equip and empower that leadership to be able to make a real impact. It's time for us to be brave.
A parable. Those who have ears, let them hear. On a dangerous seacoast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a crude little life-saving station. The building was just a hut, and there was only one sad boat. But a few of the devoted members, they kept watch over the sea, a constant watch over the waters. And with no thought for themselves, went out day and night, tirelessly searching for those who were lost. Some of those who were saved and various others in the surrounding area wanted to become associated with the station and gave of their time, of their money, of their effort to support its work. New boats were bought and new crews were trained. The little life-saving station grew. Some of the members of the life-saving station were unhappy that the building was so crude and so poorly equipped. They felt that a more comfortable place should be provided as first refuge for those that were saved from the sea. They replaced the emergency cots with beds and put better furniture in the new and enlarged building. Now, the life-saving station became a popular gathering place for its members, and they decorated it beautifully because they used it as, well, sort of a club. Fewer members were now interested in going to sea on life-saving missions, so they hired lifeboat crews to do the work. The life-saving motif still prevailed in the club's decorations, and there was a liturgical lifeboat in the room where the club's initiations were often held. About this time, a large ship wrecked off the coast, and the hired crews brought in boatloads of cold, wet, and half-drowned people. They were dirty, and they were sick, clinging to life as they were brought ashore. This beautiful new club found itself in a state of chaos. So the property committee immediately had a shower house built outside of the club where victims of shipwrecks could be cleaned up and properly dressed before coming inside. At the next meeting, there was a split among the club membership. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities as being unpleasant and a hindrance to the normal social life of the club. Some members insisted upon life-saving as their primary purpose and pointed out that they were still called a life-saving station after all. But they were finally, at long last, voted down and told that if they wanted to save the lives of all various kinds of people who were shipwrecked in those waters, they could begin their own life-saving station. And so, that's what they did. As the years went by, the new station experienced the same changes that had occurred in the old. It too evolved into a club, and yet another life-saving station was founded. History continued to repeat itself. And if you visit that seacoast today, you will find a number of exclusive clubs along that shore. Shipwrecks are frequent still in those waters, but most of the people drown. Like many of you, I have spent some considerable amount of time reflecting and thinking about Pastor Greg's sermons these past few weeks. I think that we have all heard a very hard and prophetic truth. I think it is extremely important that as we move forward, that we not let these seeds sown be gobbled up by the birds or overcome by the thorns. This has led to so many interesting conversations, and some of them difficult for folks at the Lidditz congregation. Because as I said in our talk back a few weeks ago, Greg's words are universal for so many churches in the here and in the now. And so even though I speak to you all from the Lidditz Church of the Brethren perspective, there's still some truth, a lot of truth, that we simply cannot ignore as a community of faith. I think our little life-saving stations have succumbed to this parable's finale. Our identity is lost on that stormy sea, and we have forgotten, perhaps, the call to rescue others from danger. How can we provide a refuge for those in the storm of life when the reality is that we are busy facing storms of our own making? Or we are reclined in our social clubs, oblivious to the winds howling around us, seated comfortably in our own places of privilege and blatant naivete. The social club's storm clouds are consumed with infighting, winning arguments, drawing lines in the sand and declaring who is in and who is out, and naming which generation had it the hardest and why they should be heard first. All of this is happening while navigating how to best preserve the organizational status quo and institutional stability. It is the modern Western Church's purest form of idolatry, and we must name it as such. This cannot be a part of the human experiment. This is not how we are called by God, by our scriptures, by our community's standards for living. We are to be something far, far more in our neighborhoods. We are an organization that meets the needs of its non-members first, as we care for the larger community among us. That's why our call has been and always will be to embrace our role as a heaven-sent rescue operation a community keeping constant watch over the seas of life, with a spirit of selflessness, searching out those who are lost or alone. And we need congregations and faith communities to model this for us. We need to be reminded of this call placed on our hearts to be something more than the social club. I truly believe the potential for role modeling is found within the Lidditz and Elizabethtown congregations. And I have often said that we must work to be pioneers of what it means to be a renewed church in today's world, addressing the topics head on, naming systemic sin and the things that wrong our neighbors, while pointing to a renewed reality and an alternative way of organizing our communities that is life-giving and loving, not hate-filled and judgmental. Followers of Jesus need to be crazy enough to risk it all on the stormy sea solely for the sake of rescuing others. I imagine a coast where no one is forgotten, where everyone can find healing, and no one has to drown. May it be so.
Good morning. I had prepared a number of remarks this morning, but I may or may not be using them as we go through. I guess I want to say first just how fortunate I have felt to be a part of this congregation with all of you. It's hard to believe that 15 years is a long time. It's hard to believe that I've only been here for 4 years. But in that time, I have seen so much good work done within this body, and it's just been an honor to be a part of that. But the reputation of Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren preceded you all, in that I had heard about this congregation long before I began here. Some of my time at Camp Sotara, I got to know a lot of people from the church. It's been a real honor to work with Pastor Josh and Pastor Pam, Pastor Greg, recently Pastor Eric. But it's been a real masterclass for me as someone who's just kind of starting in seminary and in ministry. To get to have the type of leadership that we have in this church has been really phenomenal. And it's something that I think is important to remember, that this congregation is very unique and special. As people who join this congregation or people who come from the outside are repeatedly telling everyone, you got something really good going on here. And I think to some degree, it's possible that people who have grown up in this congregation have simply taken it for granted, accepted the way that things are done here, and not realized how unique and wonderful that is. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of people my age who have to spend time unpacking and deconstructing shame and harm that has been done to them within their growing up within the church. You know, I look forward to the opportunity to raise my own kids in this congregation as a place that is safe and is loving and is wonderful. And so when I think about them and I think about the future of this congregation, I can't help but think about what it's going to be like for them 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. And so when I think about that, I'm encouraged to think about what it takes to keep a congregation thriving and healthy and loving and able to serve in the way that this congregation has for so long. But those things aren't a given. And we can see that all over the place, across our own denomination, across churches, across this county, this state, this country. Churches are closing their doors all the time. And there is a steady decline of aging membership slowly leads to tough budget conversations and ultimately decisions to close. And oftentimes those individuals look back on the heyday of church and think, oh, how great it was and how wonderful it could have been. And yet they think, oh, if we would have known, we would have done some things differently, we could have changed, we could have gotten ahead of some of those challenges. And so while I don't see our congregation in a period of steep decline or immediate peril, I realize that as a healthy, thriving congregation, now is the time for us to think about those changes, for us to think about what it takes for us to make sure that we are able to continue this ministry into the future. Oftentimes, people will look back on a closing congregation and just wonder, it was so wonderful for me. Why didn't other people join? So I encourage us to be thinking about what it means to serve not just the ministry to the people that is here, but as a ministry to the people who are not yet here. People like myself and others who found this congregation, it's been a beautiful thing. And so I'd encourage us to think about what it means for us to make it accessible to many, many other people. We have a beautiful thing going on here. So in sum, what we're doing is wonderful. The message of Jesus is special and this world needs it. To not be actively thinking about ways in which we can grow and share this message of peace, service, and openness to all, not only does a disservice to people who have not yet heard that message, but in a very real way is putting a bushel over a light and a rejection of Jesus' call to us to make disciples. So, Pastor Greg, thank you for challenging us these last few weeks to think about some of these things that make us a little uncomfortable. I am an Enneagram 9, which means I just want to keep the peace. That's like at the core of who I am. And so it's a stretch and it's a challenge for me to think about some of the potential conflict that exists when you explore these really necessary ideas. So thank you for pushing. Thank you for encouraging us to think about these things. I have such deep faith in this community. I've seen the incredible things that we're capable of doing. And I know that right now there's this mix of excitement and anxiety that exists. I would encourage us to lean into the excitement. There'll be a temptation to think, oh, we can't do that. It might be a little risky. We can't do this. It's not how we've always done things. That may be true. But now is an opportunity for us as a congregation to be excited about this ministry, about this church, about the lifeline that this congregation has been to so many people in a world where the church feels like it's abandoned them. So thank you for doing your part to be part of this congregation and a part of this community. I would encourage us to think about the new and the creative ways that we can do worship and ministry together going into the future. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the people who are joining us online, the people who are here as a part of this community, to work together to figure out how we move forward together. And I have deep faith in that. Deep faith in you. And deep faith in the message of Jesus that we work so hard at following each and every week. The last thing I want us to leave us with as we think about these how questions is to go back to some of the questions we mentioned in our children's time. I think they're important as we begin to process. So I'll just leave you with these questions. Where is God in all of this? What is really going on here? What is mine to do?